My stepmother replaced my sons with her influencer granddaughters on a camp trip I paid for. Said Max and Leo didn't fit the vibe. So I canceled everything and made macaroni to keep my hands from shaking. I found out through a text from the camp director. Hi Aria, just confirming the updated list. We've got Willow and Sky replacing Max and Leo for the Lakeview cabin. Everything else remains the same. I stared at the message for a long time. Read it once. Then again. My coffee went cold in my hand. Willow and Sky. My stepmother's granddaughters. Influencer spawn, both of them, the kind that wore matching pastels and got more likes on one stage photo than my entire game launch trailer. They'd replace my kids. On a trip I paid for. A trip I spent months planning to give Max and Leo something to look forward to after surviving a brutal year where their mom was glued to a keyboard 18 hours a day. I didn't reply. I just shut my laptop, stood up, and walked into the kitchen like a sleepwalker. Max was sitting at the table shirtless, hair wet from the shower. Leo was flipping through the camp brochure, asking if they got to bring their own VR headsets. I couldn't speak. My name is Aria. I'm 34, living in Portland, Oregon. I make indie video games for a living, and this year, after 10 years of grinding, one of them finally broke through. Which meant for once I had money. Real money. Enough to book a summer camp cabin for 2 whole weeks, fully paid, private suite for the boys, everything covered. I did it for them. Not because they asked, but because they waited. Waited while I pulled all-nighters. Waited while I pushed back dinner and skipped weekends. Waited while I begged them to understand that launch months don't come with sleep or hugs or breaks. And now, just days before they were supposed to leave, they were replaced. I texted the camp to cancel. Didn't explain. Didn't answer when they called to confirm. Then I put my phone on Do Not Disturb. Max came in an hour later. Mom? Why did Miss Dana say our trip got canceled? I pretended not to hear him. I turned the stove on and made macaroni. Not because anyone wanted it, but because stirring a pot kept my hands from shaking. 2 days went by. I avoided my phone like it had teeth. My inbox piled up. My boys kept asking, are we still going? I lied. I said I was figuring it out. The truth? I was panicking. Shutting down. I couldn't even imagine how I'd explain to them that my stepmother decided they wouldn't fit the vibe. That's exactly what she said in her voice memo. Sweetheart, you know I love the boys, but they're chaotic. Not in a bad way, of course. But with how curated the group is for this session, I just don't think they'll fit the vibe. Willow and Sky are so photogenic, and they're already doing the matching suitcases. It'll just look better. Look better. She meant for Instagram. For her story highlights. Not for them. Not for me. The call came that night, after I'd ignored a dozen from her. Aria, my dad's voice. Not warm, not angry. Just flat. I heard you canceled the camp. That's not how we handle things. You need to call Lisa and fix this. I swallowed hard, but my voice didn't come. You're overreacting again, he added. This is exactly why I told her not to get you involved financially. You make everything personal. He hung up before I said a word. I stood there for a long time, phone still in hand. My reflection in the kitchen window looked like someone I didn't know anymore, exhausted, betrayed, and so stupid for thinking this year would be different. I had paid for everything. And somehow my kids still got erased. I knew he'd call again. He always did. My dad didn't like unresolved things, unless they were feelings, in which case he preferred to pretend they didn't exist. The second call came 3 days later. I answered it this time. I don't even know why. Maybe I wanted to hear him admit something. Maybe I was hoping for a scrap of regret. Aria, he said, voice clipped. We need to talk. Clearly, I replied. He ignored the tone, like always. I've been going over the paperwork from the last fiscal quarter. Lisa said there's a discrepancy with the Horizon Media Fund. You moved a lump sum out of shared accounts into your development pool. I blinked. You mean the money I earned from my game? The money I moved into my own LLC after you told me I'd never need my own structure. You didn't have authority to reallocate those funds, he said, voice harder now. It's technically. Technically what? I snapped. Embezzlement? You want to go there, Dad? After you let her use the family tech fund to buy patio heaters and content creation essentials for her influencer brand? A beat of silence. Then, Lisa's part of the brand. She's growing our audience. She's done more for our public presence than your daughter who made a globally reviewed game? Who got you press coverage by association? Who asked for nothing while building everything from scratch? He sighed, like I was being dramatic. Like I was impossible. Look, this can be settled quietly. Just drop the claim. Give the money back. We'll restructure the fund, maybe create an arm for your projects. Something official. I laughed. Not because it was funny. Because it was so perfectly him. Still dangling scraps of legitimacy in front of me like I needed them. No, I said simply. Aria. No, I said again. I've been the workhorse. The scapegoat. The family's guilt sponge. For what? So Lisa could parade around like she's a CEO because she built a skincare website and taught herself Canva. He didn't reply. I could feel his silence filling up with the same thing it always did, disappointment. Not in Lisa. Not in the manipulation. But in me. For not playing along. I self-funded every build I went on. I slept in my car during PAX East. I shipped betas out of my living room with 2 toddlers climbing on my back. You know how many investor calls I took while breastfeeding? You think Lisa ever risked anything except a broken nail? You always make this so personal, he muttered. Because it is personal. Another long silence. I don't know what you want from us anymore, he finally said. I want nothing, I replied. That's the difference now. I don't want a seat at your table. I built my own. He didn't say goodbye. He just hung up. I stood there in my kitchen, staring at the screen, waiting for the wave of guilt that usually followed our fights. It never came. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a daughter begging for approval. I felt like a woman walking away from a sinking ship. And this time, I wasn't looking back. It's strange what your brain clings to when you start remembering things differently. I couldn't stop thinking about this one night, maybe 7 years ago, when I was still streaming my dev process on Twitch for barely 20 viewers. Some troll in the chat had called me a digital janitor. Said it like it was a slur. Like I was just scrubbing someone else's ideas in code. I remember staring at that comment for a long time before banning him. Later that week, my stepmother said the same thing. But she was smiling when she said it. Like it was cute. You're kind of like a digital janitor, right? She laughed, twirling her wine glass. In the trenches. Fixing bugs. Hands dirty. I mean, it's not glamorous, but it's very noble. Noble? Right. Meanwhile, she was posting photoshoots with ring lights and rented Teslas, tagging them #CEOlive. When I started developing DrevFarm, nobody in the family thought it was a good idea. Horror farming sim? Too weird. Too niche. Why don't you do something with AR? My dad had asked. Or blockchain. That's where the money is. But I kept building. Quietly. Relentlessly. Working through Max's stomach flu, through Leo's meltdowns, through sleepless nights and dev diaries no one watched. I pitched it to the family tech fund 3 times. 3 times they passed. We're focusing on scalable platforms, Lisa told me once, flipping through her pitch deck that was just Canva slides and buzzwords. Not lifestyle hobbies. Hobby? That hobby paid for their damn lake house now. The turning point came when I negotiated independent IP rights for 2 early prototypes I'd built while technically still under the fund umbrella. I knew they'd never go anywhere, not because they weren't good, but because the family didn't get games. They wanted big exits. Shark Tank stories. Viral apps and pivot slides. Not slow-burn indie titles with environmental puzzles and no monetization. So I asked to keep the rights. My dad agreed. Probably assumed they'd flop. You're really gonna pass on the fund support just to keep a few little game licenses? He asked, amused. All right, Arya. It's your gamble. It was. And I won. When DrevFarm went viral, it wasn't instant. First it was a random Reddit post. Then an indie showcase. Then a Polygon write-up. Then all of a sudden, I was waking up to emails from streamers, merch collabs, publishing offers. I said no to all of them. I wanted to own everything. Lisa tried to call it a fluke. You got lucky, she said. Timing, trends, algorithms. She said it like she understood any of those things. But I knew the truth. I didn't get lucky. I lasted. That's all it was. I stuck it out longer than anyone expected me to. They spent investor money on useless UX redesigns and vibe consultants. I shipped games that people actually wanted to play. By the time they realized what was happening, it was too late. My company had a cult following. My IP was protected. I had cash flow, licensing deals, and a player community that treated me like a real person, not some plastic founder in a blazer pretending to innovate. My dad never said congrats. Not once. He said be careful. When things go fast, they fall fast. What he meant was, you got away from us. And now we can't control you. And he was right. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't asking for a seat at the family table. I was running my own damn studio. And they were the ones knocking on my door. It started with an email marked urgent. Subject line, Horizon Compliance Audit, IP Holdings Inquiry. I almost laughed when I opened it. Almost. The sender was some mid-level auditor from the family's tech fund, someone I vaguely remembered from a holiday party years ago, the kind of guy who talked too loud about crypto and said, synergy, unironically. Now he was reaching out to verify IP compliance and licensing integrity for 3 of my published titles. Specifically, the 2 games I had secured rights to before I left the fund. The ones I had in writing. The ones my father signed off on. I forwarded the email to my attorney with a 1-line note. Here we go. Then I called Michaela, my studio manager. She picked up on the second ring. They're trying to come in through the back, I said. Family? She asked. Who else? I met Michaela 5 years ago, back when I was still gluing together Kickstarter pledges with duct tape and desperation. She knew how to wrangle chaos, especially the legal kind. She was already typing as I spoke. Let me guess, she said. They're pretending this is just a friendly check-in? Compliance, I said. Licensing review. She let out a low whistle. That's cute. The thing is, I wasn't scared. Not anymore. They were late to the fight. And unprepared. The contracts were solid. The IP transfer had been notarized. Every asset built after I left the fund was under Arya Black LLC, not Horizon, not the family fund. Mine. But the timing wasn't random. They wanted to rattle me. This was retaliation for the canceled camp. For the lawsuit. For refusing to play nice. This wasn't about games. It was about control. I'm flagging the auditor, Michaela said. No access to anything. I'll reply formally on Monday, copy legal, and tell them to submit future inquiries in writing through counsel. Perfect, I said. And Arya? Yeah. She paused. You sure you're ready for this? They're not gonna stop. I thought about my stepmother's smug little voice, telling me my kids didn't fit the vibe. I thought about my dad's silence, the way he always let her lead. I'm ready, I said. Because if this was the beginning of a war, they'd just made the first move. And they'd made it on my turf. I wasn't the daughter anymore. I was the target. But I was also the boss. It started on a Wednesday. A random DM from a fan. Hey, just saw this on Reddit. Is it true about the plagiarized assets? I blinked at the screenshot. It was a heavily upvoted thread on some indie dev subreddit, accusing my last game of stealing character models from a smaller studio. Models I'd designed myself. In Blender. With a timestamp process stream on YouTube. By noon, there were fake bug reports flooding our Discord. Claims of save files deleting themselves. AI breaking mid-level. NPCs attacking players unprovoked. None of it real. None of it in the patch logs. By the end of the day, someone had doctored a screen recording showing a glitched-out enemy flickering like a haunted JPEG. Proof of lazy development, the caption said. It was all fake. And it was all coordinated. Then came the video. An ex-collaborator, if you could call him that, named Theo. We worked together for maybe 4 months on an unreleased side project before he ghosted the team and disappeared. Now here he was on YouTube with a moody thumbnail and a title that screamed scandal. What really happened at Blacklight Studio? I watched it twice. The first time in disbelief. The second time in fury. It was 20 minutes of vague accusations, old screenshots with blurred context, and offhand comments I'd made in a private Slack years ago, twisted just enough to sound damning. She always acted like the rest of us were beneath her, he said. The kind of boss who says you're a team and then takes all the credit. Classic narcissist behavior. My favorite part? When he looked into the camera and said, with practiced concern, I just think people deserve to know who they're supporting. Right. Because nothing says transparency like ambushing someone online for views after flaking on an unpaid collaboration. The real kicker came 2 days later. A formal letter from the family fund's lawyer. They claimed I may have breached pre-existing proprietary agreements by releasing game assets, conceptually related to early fund-backed prototypes. It was legal theater. A bluff, but a dangerous one. The kind of move that made sponsors nervous. That made partners pause. Michaela's email hit my inbox 5 minutes after the letter. Subject, defense strategy draft incoming. Body, we're not playing defense. We're hitting back. Hard. I picked up the phone and called her. Let's line up everything, I said. All the proof. Dev logs, timestamps, original art files, signed IP transfers, emails, everything. We already are, she said. You've got receipts going back a decade. Good. Let them smear. Let them bluff. I built my career on transparency. On showing the work. Now I'd show it all. Because when they came at me with lies, I'd come back with the truth. And the truth had my name on every line. I filed the suit on a Friday morning. It wasn't just about the money though, yeah. $30,000 was nothing to sneeze at. It was the principle. A chunk of my development budget had disappeared during a transition year, back when Lisa still had partial access to the shared expense accounts. My lawyer traced it to a vague, consulting line item, tied to her influencer brand. She'd bought drone equipment. For a lifestyle vlog she never finished. With my dev funds. When we called it out, her response was almost funny. It was a family reallocation, she said. Why are you being so dramatic? Court was faster than I expected. Lisa showed up in heels too high for comfort and an outfit straight off a Pinterest board. She didn't even glance at me as she sat down next to my father, who looked like he hadn't slept in a week. Their lawyer, some expensive, overconfident guy in a navy suit, opened with the usual condescension. Ms. Black appears to have misunderstood how family expenditures were accounted for under the Horizon structure. My lawyer, Devin, let him finish his little speech, then calmly pulled up the bank statements. One by one. Every transaction. Every misused dollar. Every receipt labeled business expense that was clearly not. There it was, the drone, the makeup hauls, the hotel charges from a branding retreat in Scottsdale. We even had screenshots of Lisa bragging about the purchases in her private Instagram stories. Family fund win. Got the gear I needed for the rooftop shots. Hashtag CEO vibes. The judge raised an eyebrow. Lisa shifted in her seat. And my father? He just stared at the table. The defense tried to claim I had verbally approved the charges. Said there were family discussions where I'd shown support. Devin handed over a signed memo from me dated 2 years prior, explicitly removing Lisa from any financial oversight related to my studio. With my father's initials at the bottom. The judge didn't even need a recess. Her ruling was clear. Full reimbursement. Legal fees covered. And as she noted at the end, this case should serve as a reminder that family ties do not exempt anyone from basic accountability. I walked out of that courthouse into a swarm of silence. My father didn't say a word. Lisa was already speedwalking to the parking garage, heels clicking like gunfire. The reporters were waiting. Not many, but enough to catch the headline. Tech family power struggle ends in court loss. I didn't smile. Didn't gloat. But I stood a little straighter. Because that 30 grand? It wasn't just money. It was mine. Reclaimed. In public. And for once they couldn't spin it. The call came late on a Sunday night. I let it ring twice before I answered. Aria, my father said, his voice raw. I need to talk to you. I stayed silent. He exhaled, slow and heavy. The investors are pulling out. There it was. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling, letting him keep talking. We tried to secure a bridge round after everything. After the ruling. But no one wants in. They've been watching the press. The articles. The Reddit threads. No one's touching Horizon now. Not my problem, I thought. But I didn't say it. Not yet. And the debt's coming due, he added, almost as an afterthought. We're underwater. Lisa's gone. I sat up straighter. Gone. She left. Packed a bag and flew to Miami. Said she was done being villainized and needed to restore her personal brand. I let that sit in the silence. Of course she ran. That's what she did when the story stopped serving her. She left me, he said again, quieter this time. After everything I gave her. I didn't say what I was thinking, that he gave her everything and handed me nothing but expectations and silence. He went on, rambling about failed meetings, closing doors, panic from the board. I didn't interrupt. I let him wear himself out. Finally, he stopped. I know we've had our differences, he said, his voice tight, rehearsed. But I'm asking you, as your father, help me fix this. I could feel it again, that old reflex to fix, to patch, to salvage what was never mine to save. But it didn't reach me this time. It bounced right off. You made your bed, I said quietly. Now lie in it. Aria, please. I closed my eyes. You let her steal from me. You told me to drop the suit. You said I was overreacting. You stood there in court and watched. I didn't think it would come to this. No. You didn't think I would come to this. You didn't think I'd stop playing my part. He was quiet. Then, so that's it. That's it. He let out a shaky breath. You really don't care what happens to me? I paused. And then I told him the truth. I stopped caring the day you chose silence over me. You just didn't notice until the money ran out. Then I hung up. I sat there for a long time after that, the phone still in my hand. But I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I just felt light. Like a weight had finally slid off my chest. Because he'd said it himself. It was all falling apart. And for once I wasn't the one left holding the rubble. I agreed to meet him because I wanted closure. Not because I owed him anything. He picked the place, a half-empty co-working space in a strip mall in Beaverton. The kind with flickering lights and fake plants sagging in chipped white pots. I guess it was all he could afford now. He was already sitting when I walked in, hunched over a cheap folding table with the laptop open in front of him. There were bags under his eyes, a coffee stain on his shirt. He looked older. Smaller. Aria, he said, standing up like we were strangers meeting for a job interview. Thank you for coming. I didn't shake his hand. I just sat. He fumbled with the flash drive and plugged it into the laptop. I've put together a recovery plan. Minimal overhead. Just enough to keep Horizon afloat until we attract new investors. I've restructured everything, leases out completely, legally and financially. You'd have full creative oversight if you wanted it. We'd co-chair the fund. He turned the screen toward me. There's even a space here if you want it. For your team. Rent's low. And we could rebrand. Start fresh. I stared at him. All I saw was a man clinging to wreckage. I didn't touch the laptop. You're asking me, I said slowly, to fix the empire that tried to ruin me. To sit at the same table with people who called my work a hobby. Who replaced my children without blinking. Who sent lawyers after me with a smile. I know we failed you, he said quickly. I know I did. I should have stood up for you sooner. I should have listened. I tilted my head. So why now? He didn't answer. You never saw me as an equal, I continued. You tolerated me. Dismissed me. And when I stopped playing support, you turned on me. He opened his mouth, but I kept going. You watched them erase my kids from a trip I paid for. You stayed silent in court. You tried to get me to cover for Lisa's theft. And when it all collapsed, then suddenly I mattered again. He looked down at his hands. I leaned forward. I want you to understand something, and I want you to really hear it. I didn't just walk away from the business. I walked away from you. He looked up, and for once there was no argument in his eyes. No defense. Just loss. I'm not coming back, I said softly. Not to Horizon. Not to this table. Not to anything that requires me to shrink in order to belong. He nodded, just once. And that was it. No dramatic outburst. No desperate pitch. Just a quiet end. I stood, grabbed my bag, and turned to go. But at the door I looked back. You had a daughter who built something incredible, I said. But you wanted a follower. Not a partner. He didn't respond. So I walked out, leaving him alone with his laptop, his broken fund, and the echo of everything he could have had if he hadn't thrown it away. And I didn't look back. 3 months later, I opened the doors to my own indie publishing label. We called it Thread Loop, a name Leo came up with during breakfast one morning while buttering toast. You're always pulling threads, he said. Even when they say not to. I loved that. The office was small, tucked into an old converted warehouse in Northeast Portland, with exposed brick and creaky floors that sounded like history. I didn't care about the quirks. I cared that it was mine. And this time there was no one to override the guest list. No stepmothers. No compliance audits. No fake branding consultants. Just me. My team. My kids. Mom, can I wear the headset now? Max asked, already halfway into the demo room, his sneakers squeaking across the polished floor. After lunch, I said. And no breaking anything this time. I didn't break it, he yelled over his shoulder. Leo followed him in with a juice box, already giving advice he wasn't asked for. You have to let the calibration finish or you'll clip through the floor again. They sounded like chaos. They sounded like home. The studio wasn't fancy, a few desks, a recording booth, a sunlit testing area where the kids now fought over who got to try the new VR builds first. The logo was taped to the glass door with painter's tape until the real sign came in. Still, it was everything I'd spent a decade working toward. And I did it on my terms. Some days I still woke up expecting a fight. A message. A dig. Some ghost from the past trying to claw their way back into my space. But the silence held. No more smear campaigns. No more passive-aggressive voicemails. No surprise audits or lawsuits or guilt-drenched apologies. They were done. I had made sure of that. People online still asked about it sometimes. What happened with the family? Was it true you took them to court? Was that lawsuit real? I never gave them details. Let them wonder. Let the work speak louder than the drama. We released our first co-published title that fall, a narrative puzzle game called Little Signal. It sold well. Not blockbuster, but solid. Respectable. More importantly, it was ours. Fully funded. Fully controlled. Fully protected. No one could take it from me. I stood by the window one afternoon, watching Max and Leo sword fight with foam controllers, and thought about everything that had come before, the late nights, the canceled trips, the accusations, the courtroom, the final door slam. I thought about who I used to be. Then I thought about who I was now. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel bitter. I felt free. I had won. Not the way they would have defined it, not with board seats or viral press. But I won something better. Peace. Ownership. My kids laughing in the next room. And a future no one else could sabotage.